Hello, I'm Carolyn Etzel, and I'm here to briefly discuss the research I've done on the intersections of Greco-Roman theater and early Christian liturgy. Theater possesses exceptional spiritual potential for several reasons. First, theater continually pursues and demands the divine. It exists on suspension of disbelief and relies on unseen realities. Second, theater lends religious texts and structures vivacity in a way that other art forms cannot. It provides audiences with a visual, real-time incarnation of literature, and for Christians it gives exponentially more meaning to the phrase, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us." Theater forces its audiences to engage with the present moment, which in religious settings creates an animated iconography and lends accessibility to an otherwise ascetic worship experience. In addition to these connections, theater and liturgy share a common ingredient, ritual. The ability to process ritualistically is formative to human civilization and finds a unique intersection between theater and Christian liturgy. It is because of these correlations that the history of Western theater and Christianity so closely intertwine. Admittedly, the relationship simmers with enmity throughout much of history, whether in censorship from church powers or derision from the stage. Modern ecclesiastical critics of theater often cite Augustine's damning comments as reasoning for resistance. These critiques do not nullify the theatrical duplications in early liturgy, instead they affirm them. Augustine's distress with theater as an art form concentrated on the ethical implications of its integrative power. In employing a Platonic framework of being, he worried that actors and audiences alike would absorb any immoral attitudes experienced on stage and in so doing pollute the church. Rather than dismissing theater's gradual influence on the church, in his criticisms he acknowledged it. Animosities between church and stage need not negate the inspiration and illumination each offers the other. Fully interpreting the theatrical motifs in Christian liturgy requires a brief history of their relationship. Ancient theater was birthed as a form of ritualistic religious commemoration. The Greeks are generally credited with the invention of theater, and the Romans appropriated its entertainment along with much of Greek culture. Christianity blossomed in the 1st century CE, by which point theater was a long-established form of entertainment, and Christian torture was quickly adopted into the Roman arena. This persecution peaked during the reign of Nero, but continued until Constantine rose to power and converted. By this point, Christians deplored theater, and in response to the gratuitous gore and sexualization of Roman stages, the Church extinguished theatrical performance entirely. However, the Church despised the content of theater above its concept. Even Tertullian, often cited as vehemently opposed to theater, admits that, quote, "the places in themselves do not contaminate, but what is done in them," end quote. Because of this distinction, it is less surprising that the Church resurrected the art as a form of biblical narration in the subsequent medieval period, creating a liturgy subconsciously rooted in ancient theater. These fluid yet holistic influences of Greco-Roman theatricality reveal themselves in more predominant church traditions as well, such as the Eucharist. Ancient theater began as a form of spiritual ritualism, of recreating stories of the gods for worship and for communal unification. The earliest dithyrambs of the Greek stages were poetic reenactments of their gods as stories, performed for the entire community as a religious celebration. The Eucharist mirrors this form of theater, using sacred texts in a repeated physical act to contemplate a divine reality, in this case, the Last Supper. Theatricality beautifies the Eucharist, grounds it in the very roots of human artistic traditions, and provides a source of ritualistic unity to the global church. There are further significant ties between Catholic sacraments and Greco-Roman theater, specifically the Aristotelian concept of catharsis mentioned in Poetics. Tragedy elicits emotions in its audience which prompt physical responses, and through this process the negative emotions and impurities, miasma, are cleansed for the community. Theater heals through reenactment, therefore it is unsurprising that confession, purging through reliving, holds such sacrosanct power within the church for renewal. Like Greek tragedy's purging of the spectator's own flawed tendencies, confession officiates expulsion, leading to spiritual restoration. In addition to these sacramental parallels, ancient theater's presence manifests itself in the broader Christian liturgical structure. An example of this Christian adoption of secular theater traditions is the history of transitioning pagan festivals into religious holidays. As the theater festivities were marked by debauchery, the church sought to end these traditions but could not disentangle theater from the temple. In its attempt to smother pagan theater, the church instead wove it into the calendar of Christian tradition, rewriting mythological dramatic festivals in the newer Christian context, such as Advent and Lent. Furthering the connection between the early Christian worship structure and Greco-Roman theater is the use of cosmogonic narratives. The fables unified civilizations by creating a cultural pride and foundation. While Judaism has the Genesis narrative, with the birth of Christianity came the newer, more tangible history of Christ's nativity and passion, providing a powerfully theological drama and giving the new young religion an origin story distinct from its Jewish roots. The remnants of this tradition, recreating religious cosmogony as a form of theatrical worship, have endured into modernity, taking the form of liturgical worship services as well as inspiring the pageantry of church history. Opening the discourse between theater and theology inspires beautified worship and transcendent performance. Theater's unique ability to grapple with the divine and invoke the dynamic mystery of the human experience lends itself to religious expression. Theater is woven into the liturgies that have sustained centuries of worshippers, and without its dramatic influence, Christianity would find its sacramental experience incomplete. Thank you.